All right, let's go. Number 10. Helicoprion, the buzzsaw jaw that shouldn't have worked. In 1899, Russian geologist Alexander Karpinsky was examining a strange fossil recovered from Permian limestone deposits in the Ural Mountains when he encountered something that defied every principle of vertebrate anatomy. The specimen was a perfect logarithmic spiral of serrated teeth, 140 of them, arranged in a coil so precise it looked manufactured. Karpinsky spent the next 2 decades trying to figure out where on an animal this structure could possibly belong. He proposed it curled from the upper jaw like a grotesque tusk. He suggested it hung from the dorsal fin. He considered the tail. Every reconstruction looked wrong, because every reconstruction was wrong. The fossil refused to fit any known vertebrate body plan. Some museums published diagrams they would later have to retract. Helicoprion lived 290 million years ago, swimming through the shallow seas that covered what is now Idaho, Russia, and Western Australia. It grew to lengths of 25 feet, rivaling the largest modern great white sharks. For over a century, paleontologists knew almost nothing about this animal except that spiral. No skull had ever been found intact. The cartilaginous skeletons of early sharks rarely fossilize, and Helicoprion had left behind only its teeth, spinning silently through sediment for eons while scientists guessed at the creature they belonged to. The fossil was famous before anyone knew what it was. Museums displayed the spiral without knowing which way to orient it. Some specimens sat in drawers for 50 years, while the species they belonged to was reclassified 3 separate times. In 2013, researcher Livyatan at Idaho State University used CT scanning technology on a specimen that preserved rare cranial material. What the scan revealed was worse than any reconstruction had imagined. The tooth whorl sat inside the lower jaw, embedded vertically along the midline, rotating like a circular saw as the animal fed. New teeth formed at the back of the spiral and rolled forward, pushing older teeth into the curl at the center of the mouth. Helicoprion's jaw was a living buzzsaw that never stopped producing new blades. Every tooth the animal ever grew remained with it, archived in the spiral, a complete dental history carried inside the skull. The animal could not lose a tooth. It could only add more. A 25-year-old specimen carried every tooth it had grown since birth. What makes this creature particularly unsettling isn't the mechanism. It's what that mechanism implies about its prey. The spiral was optimized for slicing through soft, thick-bodied animals. Cephalopods, most likely. Ancient squid and nautiloids that grew to enormous sizes in Permian oceans. Helicoprion didn't chase small fish. It hunted things large enough to require an internal saw to process. The animal evolved an entire anatomical revolution, specifically to deal with prey we can barely imagine, because those prey species left almost no fossils behind. The victims were softer than the predator. They dissolved into the sediment while the teeth endured. Whatever swam in Permian waters large enough to demand a buzzsaw is gone, and the weapon that killed it is all we have left. The Permian extinction wiped out 96% of marine species 252 million years ago. Helicoprion's lineage vanished in that catastrophe. But the deep ocean preserved conditions that existed before the extinction: cold, dark, pressurized environments largely insulated from surface collapse. We have mapped less than 5% of the ocean floor in any meaningful detail. The abyssal plains remain effectively unexplored, and somewhere in that darkness, ancient tooth whorls continue to fossilize in sediments we have never touched. Whether anything still uses them is a question we have no instrument to answer. The spiral evolved once. Evolution rarely repeats a design that specific unless the selective pressure that produced it never fully disappeared. The prey may still exist. The predator may still exist. The ocean is large enough to hide both. Number 9. Dunkleosteus, the armored nightmare of the Devonian. In 1867, fossil hunter J. Terrell was walking along the shale cliffs of Lake Erie in Ohio when he noticed bone fragments protruding from 360-million-year-old rock. What he uncovered over the following decades became one of the most terrifying predators ever documented in the fossil record. Dunkleosteus terrelli grew to lengths of 20 feet and weighed over a ton. Its skull alone was 4 feet long, armored in bone plates thick enough to stop modern rifle rounds. It had no teeth. It didn't need them. The jaw itself was the weapon. The animal's jaw was a self-sharpening guillotine. 2 bony blades that sheared against each other with every bite, maintaining razor edges through simple mechanical wear. Biomechanical studies published in 2006 by researcher Philip Anderson calculated the bite force at 11,000 pounds per square inch at the fang tips. This places Dunkleosteus among the most powerful biters in the history of vertebrate life, surpassing modern saltwater crocodiles and approaching the crushing force of Tyrannosaurus rex. The jaw could open in 1/50th of a second, creating suction that pulled prey into the mouth before the animal even fully registered the attack. Nothing in Devonian waters was fast enough to resist that intake. The strike was complete before the victim perceived it had begun. Death preceded awareness. Dunkleosteus was the apex predator of the Devonian seas, a period when vertebrate life was still experimenting with body plans. The oceans of 360 million years ago were alien environments populated by armored fish, early sharks, and massive cephalopods. Dunkleosteus ate all of them. Fossilized gut contents and regurgitated bone concentrations reveal a creature that consumed prey so large and so frequently that its digestive system struggled to process the volume. The animal vomited regularly, expelling indigestible bone and armor in compact masses that sank to the seafloor and fossilized as grotesque monuments to its appetite. Entire Devonian fossil beds consist primarily of material Dunkleosteus had already eaten once. The animal rewrote its ecosystem from the inside. Its waste became the sediment that preserved its memory. What makes Dunkleosteus particularly disturbing is the evidence of cannibalism embedded in its own fossil record. Bite marks matching Dunkleosteus jaw geometry appear on other Dunkleosteus skulls. The species hunted itself. Juveniles, rivals, and weakened adults were all prey. In a world where nothing else could match its armor or its bite force, the only threat to an adult Dunkleosteus was another adult Dunkleosteus. The population regulated itself through pure predatory violence across millions of years of Devonian darkness. The species evolved into its own ecosystem. Predator and prey collapsed into a single armored body plan that fed on every possible version of itself. Dominance became its own extinction pressure. The only way to die was at the jaws of something identical to you. The late Devonian extinction eliminated 75% of marine species 359 million years ago. Dunkleosteus vanished in that collapse, its armored lineage replaced by faster, more efficient cartilaginous fish, but the body plan never fully disappeared from the fossil record. Smaller placoderms persisted in deep marine sediments long after the shallow water giants died out. The abyssal zone, where pressures exceed 600 atmospheres and light has never reached, preserves conditions remarkably similar to the cold bottom waters of Devonian seas. We have no systematic survey of what lives at those depths. Every deep ocean expedition of the past 50 years has returned with species new to science. How many armored jaws still close in the dark is a question our instruments cannot yet answer. The body plan was too efficient to vanish cleanly. Something that ate everything, including itself, does not leave gaps in the fossil record by accident. The gap is where the instrument ends, not where the animal did. Number 8. Megalodon, the shark that shouldn't be extinct. In 1835, Swiss naturalist Louis Agassiz examined a collection of enormous triangular teeth recovered from Miocene sediments and classified them as belonging to a shark he named Carcharocles megalodon. The teeth were 7 inches long, serrated, and indistinguishable in structure from those of a modern great white, except in scale. Agassiz estimated the animal that grew them reached 50 feet in length. Modern analysis has pushed that estimate upward. The largest Megalodon specimens approached 60 feet and weighed 60 tons, making them the largest macropredatory sharks ever to exist. The comparison to modern great whites is misleading. Great whites are rough approximations at 1/3 the scale. The mouth alone of a mature Megalodon could accommodate a full-grown human standing upright. Megalodon dominated ocean ecosystems for 20 million years, from roughly 23 million years ago until approximately 3.6 million years ago. Its prey included large whales, seals, dolphins, sea turtles, and essentially any marine vertebrate it chose to pursue. Bite force calculations published by researcher Stephen Rowe in 2008 estimate the jaw could generate 40,000 pounds per square inch, the most powerful bite ever measured in the history of life on Earth. Whale vertebrae recovered from Miocene deposits show Megalodon tooth marks deep enough to suggest the shark routinely crushed the spinal columns of adult baleen whales in single bites. The tooth marks appear on ribs, flippers, and skulls, documenting an animal that dismembered its prey methodically rather than swallowing it whole. The feeding events were prolonged. The prey remained alive for portions of them. What makes Megalodon particularly unsettling is the uncertainty surrounding its extinction. Conventional explanations cite cooling ocean temperatures, competition from early orcas, and the collapse of its preferred prey populations as the Pliocene climate shifted. But these explanations rely on shallow water evidence. Megalodon teeth are overwhelmingly recovered from coastal and continental shelf deposits because that is where paleontologists look. The species may have followed prey into deeper, colder water as surface conditions changed. The fossil record of the abyssal zone is essentially blank. We have never systematically sampled the sediments where a deep-dwelling Megalodon population would have left its remains. Absence of evidence from places we have never searched is not evidence of extinction. The extinction date of 3.6 million years ago is a statement about fossil beds, not about animals. The scientific consensus is that Megalodon is extinct. The evidence for this consensus is the absence of recent fossils and the absence of confirmed sightings. But the deep ocean routinely produces animals we believed were extinct for tens of millions of years. The coelacanth, thought to have died out 65 million years ago, was rediscovered alive in 1938. The frilled shark, a species with anatomy effectively unchanged since the Cretaceous, lives in deep water and is so rarely observed that individual sightings make international news. Giant squid were considered mythological until the first living specimen was photographed in 2004. The pattern is consistent. Large predators that relocate to abyssal environments become invisible to surface observation. Extinction and invisibility look identical from a research vessel. The distinction requires evidence we have never collected. Megalodon's prey species, large cetaceans, still exist in the modern ocean. They dive to depths exceeding 7,000 feet during feeding migrations. Whatever hunts at those depths hunts unobserved. A 60-foot shark swimming at 8,000 feet would produce no surface disturbance, leave no carcasses where humans could find them, and occupy an ecological niche we have no capacity to monitor. The absence of evidence at those depths is not evidence of absence. It is evidence that we have never looked. Sperm whales surface regularly with circular scars and gouges consistent with teeth far larger than any documented modern predator produces. The marks are attributed to giant squid. The marks do not always match giant squid. The discrepancy is rarely discussed in published literature because there is no alternative explanation the peer review process will accept. The injuries continue to appear on living animals. Something continues to produce them. Whatever that something is, it has teeth. The deep scattering layer, a dense band of marine life that migrates vertically each night from depths of 3,000 feet toward the surface, contains biomass estimates that have been revised upward 3 separate times since 2010. And each revision has added hundreds of millions of tons of previously uncounted life to our estimates of what the deep ocean contains. The most recent analysis, published by researchers aboard the Malaspina expedition, concluded that mesopelagic fish biomass alone may exceed 10 billion tons, 10 times higher than previous estimates. This represents a prey base capable of supporting apex predators on scales we have not accounted for. A deep water Megalodon population would not starve. The food is there. The food has always been there. The only thing missing from the equation is the instrument capable of detecting what feeds on it. Research vessels sample the surface. Sonar maps the bottom. The vast volume between remains effectively unobserved. Whatever swims through it swims without witnesses. And the ocean does not owe us the courtesy of making its inhabitants visible. A population does not need to be small to remain hidden. It only needs to live where we do not look. Number 7. Livyatan melvilli, the whale that hunted whales. In 2008, paleontologist Klaus Post was surveying Miocene deposits in the Pisco Ica Desert of southern Peru when his team uncovered a skull so large and so heavily armed that they initially misidentified its species. The specimen was 10 feet long, equipped with teeth measuring 14 inches in length, the largest functional teeth ever documented in any animal. The creature was named Livyatan melvilli in 2010, referencing both the biblical sea monster and Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. The name was chosen because the researchers understood what they had found. This was a whale that ate other whales. Livyatan lived 12 to 13 million years ago in the rich coastal waters of what is now the Pacific coast of South America. It grew to lengths of 50 feet and shared its habitat with Megalodon. Isotope analysis of tooth enamel and comparative studies of its jaw architecture confirm that Livyatan was a macroraptorial predator. Unlike modern sperm whales, which have teeth only in the lower jaw and feed primarily on squid through suction, Livyatan had massive teeth in both jaws and hunted through direct predatory attack. Its prey consisted of medium-sized baleen whales, dolphins, seals, and any marine mammal too slow to escape. The Miocene coast was a killing ground, shared between two apex predators occupying overlapping ecological space. Both hunted the same prey. Neither had evolved to avoid the other. The ocean was not large enough for peaceful coexistence. What makes Livyatan particularly disturbing is its intelligence. Sperm whales possess the largest brains of any animal that has ever lived, and Livyatan's cranial capacity was comparable. This was not a reflexive predator like a shark. It was a socially coordinated, echolocating hunter with cognitive capabilities potentially exceeding those of modern orcas. Livyatan likely hunted in pods, used sonar to locate prey in deep water, and employed complex pursuit tactics across miles of open ocean. The animal that hunted whales was, by any reasonable definition, thinking while it did so. It planned. It communicated. It remembered which prey had escaped before and adjusted its approach accordingly. The intelligence was not incidental to the predation. It was the weapon itself. Every attack was rehearsed across generations of accumulated knowledge. The combination of size, weaponry, and intelligence made Livyatan an apex predator in a way that modern ecosystems cannot replicate. Orcas, the closest analog, max out at 30 feet and lack the raw bite capability Livyatan wielded. Great whites, the largest modern macropredatory sharks, lack social coordination and mammalian cognition. Livyatan combined every terrifying trait that predation can assemble into a single species. For 3 million years, it hunted the Miocene seas with a combination of power and planning that no modern animal approaches. The evolutionary experiment succeeded completely. Then the fossil record goes quiet, and the explanation for that silence remains incomplete. Intelligent predators do not typically die out quickly. They adapt, migrate, and persist. Livyatan's fossil record disappears around 8.5 million years ago, and the standard explanation attributes its extinction to the same prey collapse that supposedly killed Megalodon. But sperm whales, Livyatan's closest living relatives, descend to depths of 7,500 feet during routine feeding dives. They encounter ecosystems we have never observed. Whatever shares those depths with them remains unrecorded. The deep ocean preserves the cold, high-pressure, low-light conditions that sperm whales are already adapted to exploit. If any macroraptorial sperm whale lineage followed its prey into abyssal zones during the Pliocene, no instrument we possess would detect it. The evidence would consist of occasional, unexplained carcasses, acoustic anomalies we currently attribute to unidentified sources, and the persistent pattern of deep-diving whales returning to the surface with injuries nothing in the known fossil record should be able to inflict. The injuries exist. The explanations do not. The acoustic anomalies continue to be recorded, and the recordings continue to be filed under categories that mean, functionally, we do not know what produced this sound. Number 6. Mosasaurus, the serpent that ruled the final seas of the dinosaurs. In 1764, quarry workers in the chalk mines beneath Maastricht in the Netherlands uncovered a 4-foot skull embedded in Cretaceous limestone. The specimen was so unusual that it passed through multiple collectors and was eventually seized by French revolutionary forces in 1795 and transported to Paris, where anatomist Georges Cuvier used it to establish the science of extinction itself. The animal was named Mosasaurus hoffmanni, and its discovery proved for the first time that species could vanish entirely from the Earth. The skull became the type specimen for an entire order of marine reptiles that had ruled the oceans for 30 million years. Extinction as a concept began with this animal. The irony is that extinction may not have been what happened to it. Mosasaurus grew to lengths of 56 feet. It was not a dinosaur. It was a marine lizard, more closely related to modern monitor lizards and snakes than to any reptile that walked on land. Its body was elongated, powered by a shark-like tail fluke, and equipped with 4 paddle-shaped limbs that provided precise maneuvering control. The jaws contained 2 rows of recurved teeth on the upper palate, a double dentition system that prevented prey from escaping once seized. The animal could swallow large prey whole through a hinged lower jaw mechanism functionally identical to that of modern snakes, capable of dislocating to accommodate objects wider than the skull itself. Once Mosasaurus closed its mouth, escape was not a meaningful category. The anatomy was designed around the assumption that prey would not leave. It was correct. What makes Mosasaurus particularly terrifying is the scope of its diet. Fossilized stomach contents and bite mark evidence document prey items that include sharks, plesiosaurs, sea turtles, ammonites, fish of all sizes, seabirds, and other mosasaurs. The species was a generalist apex predator that consumed essentially any animal it could catch. Cretaceous seas of 70 million years ago contained no ecological niche Mosasaurus could not exploit. It hunted in open water, in coastal shallows, and in the deep basins where sunlight faded into permanent twilight. The animal was evolutionarily optimized for total oceanic dominance, and for 10 million years it achieved that dominance without meaningful competition. The fossil record contains no predator capable of challenging an adult Mosasaurus except another adult Mosasaurus. The species was its own ceiling. The Cretaceous Paleogene extinction eliminated Mosasaurus 66 million years ago, along with every non-avian dinosaur lineage. The impact that ended the Mesozoic devastated surface ecosystems through fire, darkness, and collapsed food chains. But the effects of the extinction on deep-water ecosystems are imperfectly understood. Abyssal invertebrate communities suffered far less than shallow water fauna. Cold, dark, high-pressure environments buffered many lineages from the worst of the catastrophe. Whether any mosasaur population persisted in deep water beyond the official extinction horizon is unknowable because we have not sampled those sediments. The fossil record of the abyssal Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary is functionally absent. The silence of that boundary is assumed to mean extinction. It could equally mean migration. The assumption has never been tested because the sediments have never been drilled. Modern coelacanths, relatives of the fish that gave rise to all land vertebrates, survived the same extinction in deep marine refugia and were not rediscovered until 1938. Frilled sharks, whose anatomy has barely changed since the Cretaceous, we still hunt at depths of 5,000 feet and are encountered so rarely that each observation is scientifically significant. The pattern of deep water survival is established. Whether mosasaur-grade predators followed the same path into abyssal darkness is a question the fossil record cannot answer, because the fossil record ends where the light ends, and what happens in the pressurized black below remains one of the largest unsampled volumes on the surface of this planet. The asteroid struck the surface. It did not strike the bottom. What the bottom preserved is a question we have not earned the right to answer. The concept of extinction was built on may turn out to be the extinction that never fully happened. Number 5. Basilosaurus, the serpent whale of the Eocene. In 1834, a plantation owner in Louisiana uncovered massive vertebrae while clearing land along the Wachita River. The bones were so large and so serpentine in their arrangement that naturalist Richard Harlan classified the animal as a marine reptile, naming it Basilosaurus, meaning king lizard. The classification was wrong. When British anatomist Richard Owen examined additional specimens in 1839, he recognized the bones as mammalian. Basilosaurus was not a reptile. It was an early whale, and it was 60 feet long with a body shaped like a sea serpent and a jaw filled with the most sophisticated killing teeth the Eocene oceans had ever produced. Basilosaurus lived 40 million years ago in the warm, shallow seas that covered what is now the American South, North Africa, and parts of Pakistan. It was the apex predator of its time, unchallenged across 3 continents of coastal water. The body was elongated to a degree no modern whale approaches, roughly 5 times longer than it was deep, giving the animal the appearance of a massive aquatic snake rather than a conventional cetacean. Its vertebrae were hollow, filled with fluid in life, an adaptation that kept the enormous body neutrally buoyant without requiring constant muscular effort. Basilosaurus could hang motionless in the water column for hours, waiting. What makes Basilosaurus particularly disturbing is the evidence of its feeding behavior preserved in the fossil record. In 2015, researcher Manja Voss published an analysis of stomach contents recovered from a pristine Basilosaurus specimen in Egypt's Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of Whales. The stomach contained the remains of multiple juvenile whales of the species Dorudon atrox, a smaller cetacean that lived alongside Basilosaurus. The bite patterns on the Dorudon skulls showed consistent targeting of the brain case. Basilosaurus was not swallowing prey whole. It was crushing their skulls with its teeth, consuming their brains preferentially, and leaving the rest of the body to sink. This is a behavior modern orcas display. It is a signature of predators that hunt for pleasure as much as for nutrition. The skull crushing was efficient and deliberate. Biomechanical modeling of the Basilosaurus jaw demonstrates a bite force of approximately 3,600 pounds per square inch, concentrated at the rear molars, which were serrated and shaped specifically for shearing through bone. The animal targeted the thickest cranial vault in its prey and broke it open like a nut. Juvenile whales recovered from the same sediment beds as Basilosaurus specimens show these bite patterns with remarkable consistency, indicating not a rare behavior, but a routine hunting strategy refined across millions of years. The Eocene-Oligocene extinction 34 million years ago reshuffled marine ecosystems as ocean temperatures dropped and current patterns shifted. Basilosaurus disappeared from the fossil record during this transition, replaced by more conventional whale body plans. But the serpentine elongation of its body was not an evolutionary dead end. It was a design optimized for ambush predation in open water, and the selective pressures that produced it have never fully disappeared. Deep sea oarfish is still living animals that reach lengths of 36 feet demonstrate that elongated serpentine bodies remain evolutionarily viable in modern oceans. Oarfish are observed so rarely that most sightings come from dead specimens washed ashore. A predatory animal with a similar body plan, living at abyssal depths, would be functionally invisible to every observation method currently deployed. The shape works. The shape has always worked. What uses it now is a question the ocean has not been required to answer. Number 4. Liopleurodon, the pliosaur with the skull of a nightmare. In 1873, French paleontologist Henri-Émile Sauvage described fragmentary fossil teeth recovered from Middle Jurassic deposits in France and assigned them to a new genus he called Liopleurodon. The teeth were conical, slightly curved, and over 10 inches long. For decades, the animal was known only from these isolated teeth and scattered bone fragments. Its full size and anatomy remained speculative until more complete specimens emerged from Jurassic deposits across Europe during the 20th century. What those specimens revealed was an animal built on a scale the modern ocean cannot replicate. Liopleurodon was a pliosaur, a short-necked member of the plesiosaur lineage, and it grew to lengths of 23 feet, with a skull alone measuring 5 feet long. It lived 160 million years ago in the warm epicontinental seas that covered most of Europe during the Jurassic. Its body was massive, propelled by 4 enormous flippers that moved in an alternating underwater flight pattern, similar to how modern sea turtles swim, but on a scale no turtle has ever approached. And the flippers allowed Liopleurodon to achieve bursts of speed sufficient to ambush large prey from below, a hunting strategy that made it effectively invisible to anything swimming above it. What makes Liopleurodon particularly unsettling is the sensory system it used to locate prey. Research published in 2008 by Zoe Hamp and colleagues analyzed the animal's skull structure and demonstrated that Liopleurodon possessed directional olfaction. The nostrils were positioned internally, drawing water through the mouth and across specialized chemosensory tissue as the animal swam. This arrangement allowed Liopleurodon to detect prey by scent at distances comparable to how modern sharks track blood through water. The pliosaur was not hunting by sight alone. It was following scent trails across miles of open ocean, tracking wounded or distressed prey with the precision of a bloodhound operating in 3 dimensions. The combination of ambush capability, massive jaws, and chemical tracking made Liopleurodon an apex predator in a way that combined the worst features of sharks and large marine reptiles into a single body plan. Its prey included other marine reptiles, large fish, ichthyosaurs, and juvenile pliosaurs of its own species. The animal was another species in the long pattern of apex predators whose only meaningful threat was a larger member of its own kind. Jurassic oceans were dominated by this logic. Evolution produced apex forms so complete that competition occurred exclusively within species rather than between them. Sure, the late Jurassic extinction, approximately 145 million years ago, eliminated many pliosaur lineages as sea levels and temperatures shifted. Liopleurodon disappears from the fossil record during this period, but pliosaur-grade predators persisted into the Cretaceous, and body plans optimized for ambush predation in cold, deep water have recurred repeatedly throughout marine evolutionary history. The physical principles that favored Liopleurodon's design, hydrodynamic efficiency, powerful 4-limb propulsion, directional chemical sensing, remain valid in any aquatic environment. The abyssal zone, with its cold, stable temperatures and three-dimensional hunting geometry, would favor the same design today. Whether anything down there has converged on the same solution is unknown. The fossil record preserves only the experiments that failed visibly. The experiments that succeeded quietly leave no signature until something recovers one. Number 3. Tylosaurus, the mosasaur that rammed ships into history. In 1874, paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh described a massive marine reptile skull recovered from the chalk deposits of western Kansas, remnants of the western interior seaway that once split North America into two continents. Marsh named the animal Tylosaurus proriger, and the species quickly distinguished itself from other mosasaurs in one specific and terrifying way. The front of its skull extended forward into a reinforced rostrum, a solid bony projection that had no role in feeding. It was a battering ram, and Tylosaurus used it the way an orca uses its head, to strike prey with blunt force before consumption. Tylosaurus grew to lengths of 46 feet and lived 85 million years ago. It was one of the largest mosasaurs ever to exist and dominated the western interior seaway as an unchallenged apex predator. Its prey list, reconstructed from fossilized stomach contents and bite mark analysis, includes sharks, plesiosaurs, sea turtles, fish, seabirds, and smaller mosasaurs. A specimen recovered from South Dakota in 1918 contained the articulated remains of a fish, a shark, a seabird called Hesperornis, and fragments of another mosasaur, all in a single stomach. The animal was not a specialist. It was an indiscriminate consumer operating at the top of a food chain it had functionally reshaped to serve its appetite. What makes Tylosaurus particularly disturbing is the ramming behavior preserved in its fossil record. Multiple specimens show healed injuries consistent with high-impact collisions. These injuries are not random. They are concentrated on the reinforced snout, indicating that Tylosaurus routinely struck objects with its head at velocities sufficient to cause skeletal trauma. In some cases, the injuries appear on specimens that also show bite marks from other Tylosaurus individuals, suggesting that ramming was part of intraspecific combat as well as predation. The animal fought its own kind, with techniques derived from its hunting behavior. The skull was a weapon used against prey and rivals alike, and evolution had reinforced it specifically to survive the impacts that would have killed a less specialized predator. The behavior has a modern parallel that is worth examining. Orcas are documented to ram large prey, including whales and sharks, at high speed to stun or injure them before moving in for the kill. Orcas also ram each other during territorial disputes. The strategy works. It works because water amplifies the force of a moving body, and a reinforced skull delivering that force concentrates it at a single point of impact. Tylosaurus employed the same physics 85 million years before orcas existed, using an anatomy evolved for exactly that purpose. The convergence is not coincidental. The ocean rewards this specific hunting technique, and it has rewarded it repeatedly across vastly separated lineages. Tylosaurus vanished in the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction 66 million years ago, alongside all other mosasaur species. But the body plan, the technique, and the ecological role persist in convergent forms across modern oceans. The deep ocean in particular contains vast open water habitats where ambush predation with ramming techniques would be selected for strongly. Large prey items dive routinely to depths of 5,000 feet and beyond. Something that struck them in darkness with sufficient force to stun would require no other weapon. The hunting method itself does not require visibility, coordination, or sophisticated tracking. It requires only mass, speed, and a reinforced skull. These are not difficult traits for evolution to produce. The fossil record shows it producing them repeatedly. What the deep ocean has produced in the absence of fossil evidence remains a question of sediment cores we have not yet drilled. Number 2, Shastasaurus. the ichthyosaur larger than any modern whale. In 1895, paleontologist John C. Merriam described fragmentary vertebrae recovered from Triassic deposits in the Shasta region of Northern California. The bones belonged to an ichthyosaur, a member of the fish-shaped marine reptile lineage that dominated oceans from the early Triassic through the Middle Cretaceous. What made this specimen remarkable was its size. Subsequent discoveries, particularly in British Columbia and Nevada, revealed that Shastasaurus was not merely large. It was the largest marine reptile ever documented, reaching lengths of 69 feet. Modern blue whales, the largest animals ever to exist, sometimes approach 100 feet. Shastasaurus came closer to that scale than any other non-cetacean marine animal in Earth's history. Shastasaurus lived 210 million years ago in the deep open waters of the Triassic Panthalassic Ocean, a global ocean that covered roughly 3/4 of the planet's surface. Its body was proportioned differently from later ichthyosaurs. The head was small relative to the body, the snout was short, and the teeth were reduced or absent in adult specimens. These features initially puzzled paleontologists. How could an animal this large survive without substantial dentition? Research published in 2011 by Ryosuke Motani and colleagues proposed that Shastasaurus was a suction feeder, using rapid expansion of the mouth and throat to draw in large soft-bodied prey, primarily cephalopods, in a manner functionally similar to how modern sperm whales feed on squid. What makes Shastasaurus particularly unsettling is the scale of the prey implied by its size. An animal 69 feet long, consuming primarily cephalopods through suction feeding, required a sustainable population of very large squid. The Triassic oceans must have contained cephalopods on scales we cannot easily imagine, because the predator that fed on them evolved to match. Fossil beaks recovered from Triassic sediments hint at ancient squid species that rivaled or exceeded modern giant squid in size. These cephalopods have left almost no body fossils because their soft tissues rarely preserve. We know they existed because Shastasaurus existed, and something had to feed an animal that large. The feeding ecology places Shastasaurus in the deep water column, where suction feeding works best, and where large soft-bodied prey concentrates. Or the animal was not a surface dweller. It was a deep-diving specialist that pursued prey into the twilight zone, where visibility fails and pressure rises. Triassic oceans were three-dimensional hunting grounds extending miles below the surface, and Shastasaurus was optimized for exploiting the deepest layers of that volume. The body plan did not persist into later ichthyosaur lineages, which tended towards smaller, faster, more conventional predators. But the ecological niche Shastasaurus occupied, deep-water suction feeding on massive cephalopods, is a niche that has been demonstrably filled in modern oceans by sperm whales. Sperm whales max out at about 65 feet. Shastasaurus reached 69 feet. The sizes are not coincidentally similar. They represent the physical maximum imposed by the hydrodynamics of deep-diving predators that feed through suction on large cephalopods. Evolution has converged on this size twice across 200 million years of separation, once in marine reptiles and once in mammals. This means the niche is real and stable, and it means the cephalopods that support it must also be real and stable. We know sperm whales feed on giant squid. We know giant squid exist. What we do not know is whether the cephalopod populations at abyssal depths support predators we have not documented. Sperm whales return from deep dives with injuries and sucker scars, and the scale of some of those scars implies cephalopods substantially larger than any specimen ever recovered intact. The prey exists. The predator exists. The size class between documented species and what actually swims down there remains unsampled. Number 1, the unnamed apex. In 1997, oceanographers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded an acoustic signal in the Pacific Ocean so powerful it was detected by hydrophone arrays 3,000 miles apart. The sound, designated the bloop, matched the acoustic profile of a large animal vocalization, but exceeded the known volume of any documented marine species, including blue whales. NOAA eventually attributed the signal to ice quakes from Antarctic ice shelves, an explanation that accounts for some features of the recording, but not all of them. The bloop was one of many anomalous deep ocean signals that remain categorized as unidentified. The upsweep, the train, the whistle, the slowdown, yet each one a recorded acoustic event that does not match any known natural or biological source with complete confidence. The deep ocean produces sounds we cannot explain. It produces them consistently, across decades of monitoring, using instruments designed specifically to detect submarine activity during the Cold War. These instruments have recorded hundreds of anomalous signals. Most have been attributed to geological phenomena, or reclassified as probable biological sources once larger whale populations were better documented. A small percentage remains unexplained. The official position is that these unexplained signals will eventually be resolved as monitoring technology improves. This position assumes the sources are already known to science and simply misidentified. The assumption has not been tested, because testing it would require confirming the existence of a source. What makes this final entry particularly terrifying is the statistical weight of what the ocean conceals. Marine biologists estimate that between 1/3 and 2/3 of all ocean species remain undiscovered. At abyssal depths, the ratio climbs higher. Every major expedition into the deep sea returns with species new to science, and many of these species represent not just new taxa, but new body plans, new ecological niches, and new physiological adaptations. The pattern is not slowing down. Each new technology that allows deeper or longer observation reveals additional forms of life. The expected curve has not leveled off. We have not reached the limit of what the ocean contains. We have only reached the limit of what we can currently see. The prehistoric predators cataloged in the fossil record, Helicoprion, Dunkleosteus, Megalodon, Livyatan, Mosasaurus, Basilosaurus, Liopleurodon, Tylosaurus, Shastasaurus, each represents a successful evolutionary experiment that persisted for millions of years before vanishing from our documentation. The extinction dates assigned to these species are based on the last fossils recovered from accessible sediment. They are not based on direct observation of death. A species that relocated to inaccessible habitat before its final surface population died would produce an identical fossil record to a species that went truly extinct. The two scenarios cannot be distinguished without sampling the inaccessible habitat directly. The abyssal zone has never been systematically sampled for vertebrate fossils. The sediment cores drilled for petroleum exploration focus on hydrocarbon deposits rather than paleontological preservation. The research submersibles that have descended to extreme depths have spent total observation time measured in hundreds of hours across the entire history of deep ocean exploration, a negligible sample of a volume that covers more than half the planet's surface. What we know about the deep ocean is extrapolated from fractional observation. What we do not know remains unquantified because we have no framework for quantifying ignorance at that scale. Every apex predator cataloged in this list shared common features that made them successful. Large body size, generalist diets, high intelligence, or sophisticated sensory systems, adaptability to varied ocean environments. These traits are precisely the traits that would allow a species to survive relocation to deeper, colder, darker habitat during periods of surface ecosystem collapse. The extinction events that supposedly eliminated these predators were surface phenomena, driven by impact events, atmospheric changes, or shallow water ecosystem collapse. The deep ocean experienced these events differently. Cold, high-pressure, chemosynthetic ecosystems persisted through extinction boundaries that devastated surface fauna. Whether vertebrate predators followed their prey into these refugia is unknown because the refugia remain unsampled. The silence of the deep ocean is assumed to indicate absence. It more accurately indicates that we have not listened carefully enough, for long enough, with sufficient instrumentation, in enough locations, and to distinguish between absence and invisibility. The hydrophone arrays that recorded the bloop also recorded thousands of ordinary whale vocalizations, ship noise, seismic activity, and ambient sound. The unexplained signals are a small fraction of total recordings, but they are a persistent fraction. They continue to appear. Something continues to produce them. The explanation that satisfies the scientific community is that the sources are geological or biological phenomena we have not yet identified. The explanation that the scientific community avoids is that some of these signals may originate from species we have not discovered. The creatures cataloged across this list are understood to be extinct because their fossils stop appearing in accessible rock. This is the definition of extinction as paleontology operates it. A definition built entirely on what we can reach and observe. The deep ocean is neither reachable nor observable at the scales required to falsify extinction claims for deep water lineages. Every apex predator in this list could theoretically persist in abyssal populations, too small, too isolated, or too acoustically distant to trigger detection with current technology. The theoretical possibility does not constitute evidence, but the absence of evidence does not constitute proof of absence either. It constitutes the limit of our current ability to look. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface. Its average depth is 12,000 feet. Its deepest points exceed 36,000 feet. The volume it contains is the largest continuous habitat on this planet. What's ADCs, and more than 95% of that volume has never been directly observed by human beings or their instruments. What swims through that volume is overwhelmingly unknown. The prehistoric predators cataloged in this list represent the documented apex forms of earlier oceans. Whether those oceans ever fully ended, or whether fragments of them continue to exist in the unobserved deep, is a question that will remain open until the day an expedition returns with evidence that answers it. The ocean is under no obligation to provide that evidence on our timeline. It has kept its secrets for 290 million years, and it shows no sign of yielding them soon. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.